today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about,
Do you feel like sometimes, even though you've both said you're sorry, there's some old emotions, maybe resentment, fear, hurt, sadness that are getting in the way of your relationship? Are past mistakes keeping you from showing up in your relationship as fully as you'd like? Do you feel like that relationship just isn't as deep as you'd like it to be? The chances are there's a lack of forgiveness or self-forgiveness. The truth is that forgiveness without emotional release is incomplete. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship, and we're going to talk about how to really reconnect with your party. It's about going further than I'm sorry. It's about true, deep forgiveness. And I want to be crystal clear. When I say forgiveness, this is about cleaning up the roots of whatever the behavior was on your side or their side that led to the rift in your relationship. Do you feel like you've forgiven someone, yet there are traces of resentment or regret? Or maybe you've forgiven them intellectually. You can see that what you did was wrong, but you still feel some sense of hurt. Like, why didn't they apologize to me? Well, if that's going on for you, this is a great episode for you. It might even be that you feel like the other person said that they forgive you, but their behavior doesn't reflect their words. Again, this episode is perfect because we're going to explore the difference between surface level forgiveness and deep letting go. And I want to be really clear that when we talk about deep letting go here, we are not talking about, oh, that never happened. This is a clean slate and you can just do it again. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about actual changes in behavior. It might even be considered a change in personality. Is it personality? There's who we are that is immutable, our spirit, we are who we are, and then there's how it's expressed. We're going to call, for the purpose of this episode, the way we express ourselves as our persona, as it's perceived by other people, or personality. So yeah, it might be a personality change in that the way that you're perceived is different, but you're still who you are, but you're not that person that they judged you to be before, or your partner is not that person that you judge them to be. And I want you to hear this, that judgment, really what we're talking about here is judgment. There's usually a judgment, that's an assumption about the other person or that the other person's made about us. That's based on, it's sitting on these legs of hurt, sadness, fear, anger, maybe some guilt, maybe some shame. All that stuff is in there supporting that assumption that we have about them. This is particularly true if something that feels really egregious has happened. I worked with a lot of couples who have had infidelity in their relationship. Infidelity. I don't even like that word. I mean, I use it because it's on the internet, but really, I work with a lot of couples who have had one partner step out of the marital covenant and have relationship with someone else. And the reason why I phrase it that way is because infidelity makes it sound like they are an infidel. All right. But when somebody steps out on the marriage, it's usually because their needs are not being met in some way. And if I'm speaking from personal experience here, when someone stepped out on me, I had a sense that it was happening. I had a sense that their needs weren't being met, but I just kind of la-di-da wanted to look the other way. I want to be clear. I'm not talking about my current wife, but a past relationship. I looked the other way and I just was in complete denial about it. And then when it came up, I was hurt and angry, but deep down, I wasn't really surprised. And that's because this process of stepping out of a covenant or an agreement that we have with someone about our intimacy is rarely completely unconsciously unacknowledged. Consciously it might be, but unconsciously there's some clue that this is happening. And my personal experience of that, let me just share the whole story with you, was I needed to be in that relationship so badly that I desperately, first I beat my girlfriend up emotionally for doing it. How could you do that? I broke trust, but and then I said, you know what? I said, I forgive you, but I didn't. I receive you back into our relationship. We were living together at the time. And then I passive aggressively punished her for it And she took it because she had not forgiven herself. And it was a really unhealthy dynamic. And that's really what we're talking about here is there's saying you forgive someone and saying you've moved on. There's saying you've forgiven yourself and saying that you've moved on. But if you haven't actually moved on and there hasn't actually been a release of the judgment and the supporting emotions, then there's vulnerability for pain, there's opportunity for abuse, emotional abuse, there's opportunity for an unhealthy dynamic that is destructive of the relationship. And if you have children, this is particularly awful because those innocent children absorb this insanity. And I shared my story with you because I want you to get that we all do this dance. There are very few couples who don't. And if you're listening to this episode, the chances are that unconscious dynamic of stated forgiveness without actual emotional alignment or belief alignment with that on an unconscious level is probably present. The truth is that forgiveness without emotional release is incomplete. Intellectual forgiveness is often a decision made by the conscious mind. In fact, the forgiveness process, any process of change, starts with a decision. Hey, I need to change this. I choose to forgive you. But the true forgiveness is following through on the decision, not just with conscious words, but making sure that our unconscious mind is in alignment with our conscious mind. We're 80 or 90% unconscious mind, which makes us feel, when I say that to a lot of people, they feel terribly out of control. But the truth is your unconscious mind wants to let go of this stuff because it knows it's unhealthy. It wants to let go of it, and it wants to keep you safe. It holds on to it because it doesn't feel safe. It holds on to it because a learning or a lesson didn't come out of the experience to make sure that it won't happen again. And the lesson of the learning isn't, I can't trust that person, though that might be a lesson. The lesson is usually something that we need to learn, a principle that we need to learn so that the next time we're having a similar dynamic, we handle it differently. But I get ahead of myself. Research shows that people who forgive fully and completely in mind and body experience greater emotional freedom, less stress, and improved relationships. They also have greater emotional resilience. And who doesn't want that? Everybody. Are past mistakes keeping you from showing up in your relationship as fully as you'd like? Do you feel like that relationship just isn't as deep as you'd like it to be? The chances are there's a lack of forgiveness or self-forgiveness going on, and they go together, right? We can't make a judgment about another person unless we've made it about ourselves. In fact, to some extent, when we're angry at someone else, there's some form of self-forgiveness that needs to happen as well. Forgiveness is not just for the other person, it's for us. In fact, it's all for us, but we're not just forgiving the other person. We may also be forgiving ourselves. We may be forgiving one of our parents, one of our siblings. We might be forgiving an old girlfriend or an old boyfriend. We might be forgiving someone else who hurt us in a way that felt similar to that in the forgiveness process. For forgiveness to really be whole and complete, it needs to be through all the similar hurts, fears, angers, sadnesses. It needs to be, or guilt or shame, all the similar emotions that happened in different instances that feel the same, that taste the same as what's going on in our day-to-day life. If you're going from 0 to 60 with someone consistently, the chances are there's some old stuff that needs to be resolved. Releasing emotional burden involves acknowledging your personal mistakes and perceived shortcomings, not just theirs. Let's go back to my example. In order to truly forgive my girlfriend at that time, I had to forgive myself for looking the other way when she was expressing fear about my behavior. I had to forgive myself for numbing my own emotions and choosing to not be aware of what was broken in our relationship. I need to forgive myself for that because that was what led to me not acknowledging her needs. That was what led to me bullying her. That was what led to me driving her into the arms of someone who could fulfill the need for closeness that I wasn't giving her at that time because of my stuff. I also needed to forgive her for breaking her word to me. But guess what? Being angry at her about her word was also about all the times that my own sense of integrity had not been whole, and that I had not yet forgiven myself. There was no forgiving her without forgiving myself. Also, forgiving myself was vital to that process. Now, there are ways that we can let go of these emotions. One way is through a process we talk about here at Rich in Relationship, a good deal called mental and emotional release, where we take you through a process of releasing, helping your unconscious mind to release old emotions. It's a deep dive into your past and helps remove blocks to success, not just in your personal relationships, but in other areas of your life, like career and health and personal success. There are all kinds of areas that we can help with this process. But in terms of forgiveness, it's especially effective because it literally takes you through the whole gamut of negative emotions that I've been talking about: anger, hurt, sadness, fear, guilt, shame, all of them. Other ways to do this, besides mental and emotional release, are through meditation and prayer and journaling. A form of journaling would be to think about the nature of the hurt that's being experienced and to write out all the instances in your life where you've experienced that hurt. First, the name of the person, the situation. All the situations are going to be similar in flavor, and the kind of hurt, right? That's how you're going to know that the situation and the kind of hurt will be, or sadness or fear or anger or guilt or shame is going to be, or actually, I would stick with situations that are similar, and I would write out the different emotions. The unresolved emotions may not always be the same, but just do an inventory of your own life. That's basically what we do in the mental emotional release process. And then through mindfulness, meditation, and prayer, allow your unconscious mind to release it. Or if you have a belief in a higher power that you call God, ask God to intervene and take it from you. If you're a person of faith, there are scriptures that are very specific about this. It's about capturing thoughts that are in the way of your having a deeper experience of your higher power and turning them over to the Holy Spirit to have them realigned and readjusted. And in this case, we're talking about the unconscious mind and its connection to the collective unconscious. There's an interaction that happens there. And you may experience full release or you may not. Another portion to that process and to any release process would be to demonstrate that you have done the work and shifted your focus, that your personality, the way you express yourself has changed. Going back to my example, at that time, I was far from honest. I was emotionally abusive, very angry. And part of the amends to that girlfriend, which I made years later, was to go to her and acknowledge that and say, you know what, I get it. You know, who I was at that time. I wasn't being honest with myself, but I told myself I was being honest, but I wasn't being honest with myself. I crossed a lot of emotional lines with you that were hurtful to you, and I deeply regret it. And I will not behave that way again in another relationship, and I wish you all the best. And that was a way that I demonstrated that I had gone through a change. It was by acknowledging what I had done and acknowledging how I had evolved with this new perspective. And the amends making process is basically a declaration to ourselves and to the other person that a change has happened. And I will tell you that sometimes we slip back. We see ourselves slipping back into that behavior. But when we make that declaration, our unconscious mind is on guard. The declaration tells our unconscious mind, it's time for a change. It's time for honesty. We've let go of this pattern. We're going to create new patterns to take its place. And in some instances, when we make the amends and we find ourselves slipping back, it means that we've either been incomplete in the work or we weren't completely honest in the work. And it might very well be that we need to do it with someone else just so that they can hold us accountable and keep us honest. So I'm just putting that out there. You know, if you find that you're in a recurring pattern, that an apology, a declaration of amends, an acknowledgement of the wrong, and you find yourself repeating that kind of wrong, you might really want to reach out and get some support with this. When you forgive yourself and your partner completely, you get to start fresh. Wouldn't you like to start fresh with your partner? True forgiveness, in which not only do we declare that we are forgiving, but it is also supported by releasing old emotions and declaration and amends, will open the door to deeper understanding and renewed intimacy. And it won't happen like that. Right? The way this goes is, in my current marriage, when I've made a declaration and an amends, that declaration has been tested. Situations that used to trigger the old behavior have come up again. And when I demonstrate that I have a learning of how to handle that situation now that does not involve being dishonest, abusive, or whatever, and I handle it in a way that either protects me and doesn't engage in the behavior or calls out the trigger as being something that brings up an emotion in me that reminds me of the past. Once I've passed that test, usually a new opportunity for vulnerability and intimacy show up. And that's because healthy people will validate our declarations. They won't just believe them on face value. If your partner just believes you on face value, there may be something not quite right in your relationship. It's normal and natural to test. And you will find yourself unconsciously testing your partner when they do the same. And the trick is, when you do see some backsliding, if they make a declaration to you, and then you test that declaration, and their reaction is the old reaction, the old emotional reaction again, you have to decide how you're going to react. Are you going to stuff it and start looking for a new partner? Are you going to use an I statement? I feel scared when it seems like your response to X is Y, because in the past, that meant that we were engaging in an unhealthy dynamic that I really don't want to engage in. Are you going to ask to get some help together if you see redundant, destructive behavior? Might be if you really care for this person and you know that in their heart they really do want a loving partnership with you, reaching out might be the best thing you can do. So wrapping this up, forgiveness involves a decision, a declaration really. It involves letting go of old emotions, and sometimes emotions, not just from now, but emotions from our past. Because when we go from 0 to 60, there's probably some old emotions from the past that are coming up also. It involves demonstrating that the forgiveness has been made. So we no longer are reacting in a way that's angry or fearful. We might demonstrate self-forgiveness or change when somebody else calls us out on our behavior by showing that we're not going to behave the same way when our fears come up, that we're going to find new ways to express them that are healthier and easier for our partner to receive. If we have trouble letting go of old emotions and old hurts, sadnesses, fears, etc., anger, then it's worth bringing up with our partner, and or for both of us or for you to get some outside help. And here's the deal. The tendency is to say this hurt, fear, anger, sadness, guilt, shame, etc., is their fault. And if I just get rid of them and get a new partner, it'll be better. And that doesn't work, because we really need to clean up our side of the street. So it's worth it to clean up our side of the street so that we can show up more vulnerable, loving, help create a safer, more trusting environment for intimacy. And in the next episode, we're going to talk more about vulnerability. Right? We've talked about the obstacles to vulnerability. Now we're going to actually talk about what it means to be vulnerable. Look forward to seeing you there. As always, please subscribe to Rich in Relationships so that you can get the latest podcasts that we put out and keep getting the information you need to have a healthy, vibrant relationship.